This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so thank you for standing by as we switch gears from the cost of living to production and growth. Appreciate all of you still being here and listening in. Um, so, moving on to production and growth. So, I want you to switch gears in your mind. We just got done talking about the cost of living, which really affects the consumer price index and the consumer side of things. Now, I want you to think about the business side of things, the producers, the firms. Okay, so we talked quite a bit last week about gross domestic product, and we talked about real GDP and nominal GDP, and the differences between those things. We also calculated the gross domestic product on a per person basis. I don't know if you remember that part of the conversation. It was toward the end of the chapter, but we on gross domestic product, but we talked about the allocation on a per person basis. Now, why do we do that? Why do we look at it at a per person basis? We do that because we want to understand what the contribution is, the growth rate, per person on a per person basis. When we look at it per person and we combine all those people together, we could look at it nationally. Individually, we look at how much each person in the society is contributing to the growth of the society. Okay? It varies a lot from country to country, but we're focusing on the United States. The GDP per person is relatively high, and we know that our standard of living in the United States is high in comparison to other countries around the world. This is true for most developed nations. The growth rate depends on how rapid the real gross domestic product per person grew in a typical year. So the growth rate, the higher the growth rate, indicates that the GDP per person in that particular year was high. That's what that means. Since there's differences in growth rates from one country to another, we rank them based off of the income changes over time. So, in looking at this chart, we can see between the years of 1870 to 2017, which is a very wide range of time, we can see the differences where we started and where we ended at the beginning of the time period 1870 to 2017. In the United States specifically, we started at $4,443 per person in 2017 dollars to $59,532 per person in real GDP in 2017. That would indicate a stable growth of 1.78% per year. So how do we figure that? We took the end of year period by the recent year 2017 divided by the beginning of the period, beginning during the time period. So 2017 divided by 1870, and then we multiply it, of course, by 100. So we can see where this kind of growth comes from, right? So just again gives you an idea of a comparison of how quick countries can grow over time. And why do countries grow? It's based off of productivity. The more productive the citizens of the country are, the more quantity goods and services they produce, and the quality is of course also higher, and the production from each unit of labor of output is how we measure the productivity. So how productive is one person? It depends on the number of units that they're producing and the number of those units. So number of units they're producing and the quality of each unit, right? So that's productivity. Why is it important? The higher the productivity, the higher the standard of living is going to be. Okay, it's the growth in the productivity is the key determinant for living standards. So the more productive the society is, the better standard of livings that society is going to have. Yeah, it's as simple as that. So what determines productivity? Physical capacity, how much each person can produce. What's their capacity? The human capital per worker, how much is each worker being paid? How much are they contributing based off their knowledge from education, training, and experience? So I look at the human capital represents knowledge, education, training, experience. They're contributing that capital. That's what human capital is. It's what you have. It's your skills. That's your capital. Okay. Natural resources per worker and the technology used. All of these things help to determine productivity. Looking at the physical capital, as the name implies, it's the physical capability of stocking equipment in buildings, etc. It's the physical structure. Human capital are the skills, education, training, and experience. So your human capital are your skills. And you take your skills and you apply those to your job. That's what makes you a skilled worker. Your skill adds to productivity. Natural resources used per person, such as land, minerals, rivers, etc. And of course, the technology being used to produce goods and services. We introduce something like artificial intelligence, and all of a sudden, the productivity increases. We also look at, in addition to productivity, we also look at savings and investment when we think about productivity. So we look at how much natural resources and other capital is being invested in order to be more productive. Examples of this would be a company expanding their factory by adding new production lines. They're investing in additional equipment, maybe some more buildings, and definitely some more people in order to increase their capacity, increase their production. Right? That's an investment into the future productivity. And of course, with every investment that the company makes, there's going to be some trade-offs. There's going to be fewer natural resources available. There's going to be a larger consumption of goods and services, etc. So that's our investment side of things. And then, of course, we also have the savings side of things. When we have higher savings rates, there's going to be fewer resources to make the consumption of goods, meaning if I'm not investing, I'm saving. If I'm investing, I'm not saving. You see, there's an inverse relationship between savings and investing. When you invest time and money and effort, that means that you have less time, money, and effort to save. Maybe the opposite is also true. So when you save more of those things, time, money, and effort, the productivity is going to be less because you're not investing. You see? That's what this simply means. So the higher savings rate typically means, we're going to be less productive. And when we're less productive, that usually means that GDP might be a little less. When we spend more or invest more, there's a higher gross domestic product. The other thing to consider when we look at productivity is the law of diminishing returns. The law of diminishing returns tells us that once I reach my maximum output, the benefit from one additional unit of input is no longer realized. What that means is that I'm going to plateau. I invest, and then all of a sudden, my investments no longer matter. I've reached the maximum. I've reached the point of equilibrium from a perspective of my inputs. I can't put any more into it. I'm at my maximum. I've reached the maximum point. That's the law of diminishing returns. So every time past my maximum, if I keep adding on, it's no longer making a difference. In fact, it makes it worse. That's what diminishing returns is all about. It's a law of diminishing returns. So in the long run, you can save or invest, save or invest, save or invest. You're going to hit a point where it no longer makes sense. Okay, that's what law of diminishing returns tells us. Here it is graphically. So here we can see I'm investing and saving, investing, saving, and I get to a point. And when I get to that point, I plateau. Okay, I'm highly productive. You get to the point of being highly productive. To be more productive, it no longer makes a difference. I've reached my maximum capacity. I've reached my maximum limits. So it doesn't matter if I add more. It actually makes it worse when I add more past a certain point. That's what law of diminishing returns tells us. From that perspective, it also means that countries that started off a little bit worse have to play catch up, right? The countries that are developing, they need to catch up, and they are, and they're working on that. And so the law of diminishing returns creates what we call the catch-up effect. Those countries that started off late tend to grow more rapidly, right? That's what we see, for example, in South America and in Mexico, is that those countries they're developing nations, and those developing nations, they're growing rapidly, which is great. But it's a result of the catch-up effect. Because the developed countries already reached their maximum levels of output, all of the remaining balance basically is transferred to those developing nations that are catching up. Although there's some countries that are still out in our world that have low productivity and very low levels of investment. And therefore, those countries are much worse off than those that are developed or developing. Wealthier countries like the United States and most of Europe are highly productive, and they take their additional capital investment and invest it to continue to grow. Of course, countries that are developing, nations that are not as wealthy, they're developing at a much faster rate, much faster than those that are already developed. Oftentimes, we find foreign direct investment as a result of the other nations' rapid growth and expansion. One country will invest into another in order to expand their businesses, right? So think about like Ford, General Motors, other auto manufacturers that are based here in the United States and investing in new production facilities in Mexico and South America. Why do you think a company like those would do that. It's a form of foreign direct investment into those countries in order to facilitate growth in those countries and, of course, for the company, right? So that just gives you an idea of how that works. One of the biggest companies on the planet that does this very effectively is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is notorious for opening up bottling facilities throughout the world as a form of foreign direct investment. It's a very good thing. It's just, I wish their products were a little better. So these countries, of course, they benefit from foreign direct investment. The capital is going into those countries and it's being spent and it's creating more tax revenue, all those great things. And it's also leading to higher productivity, higher wages, better technology, etc. So foreign direct investment, very good thing, very good thing. The World Bank, which is a nonprofit agency that kind of oversees, not overseas, they measure that type of foreign direct investment. The World Bank encourages a lot of foreign direct investment to help to benefit the society of the world as a whole, right? That's what the World Bank tries to do. They look at ways to fund activity around the world, especially in developing nations, to make everyone better off. That foreign direct investment makes its way to infrastructure in those countries and helps to really advance those countries into becoming better off. World Bank was set up after World War II. The idea, of course, was to stabilize the global environment and to, of course, promote the development in those countries that were damaged by World War II and those that are seeking growth. We talked about the human side of things. On the human side of things, I said that human capital, one of the biggest things is the education. The more educated you are, the more human capital you have, the more valuable you are, you see. So, which is the reason why all of you are here with me today, is because you're trying to improve your education and become more valuable. You're through both self-enrichment and enrichment of the society. That's why you're here. So we're investing in you through education. You're investing in yourself through education. You're closing the gap. Now, what do you forego when you sit in the seat here today? You're foregoing your wages because you're here with me rather than working, right? That's the opportunity cost. Overall, it's all positive. It's a positive thing. Yeah. So human capital involves education and, of course, leads to a healthier population. The more educated you are, the better off you are. Healthier workers are more productive, and you tend to have better wages as a result of having better education. See, it's all related. The better your education is, the healthier you are, the more productive you are. The more productive you are, the higher your standard of living is. See how it's related, right? The idea is that this continues on, and it continues for everyone. That's the idea. On the opposite side of things, in other nations where they don't have access to education like you do, it's not so good for them. They don't have access to the education, therefore they remain in an impoverished nation. They're not going to be as healthy. They're not going to have a good life because they don't have access to education. They remain in a state of poverty. Right? And that, of course, is not good for their physical health. So it's very cyclical. It is a lot of it's driven by the society, and of course, policies by the governments. So the better the policies are, the better the education is, the better off the people are. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's good to understand those differences. So how do we foster economic growth? We protect human rights, property rights, and have political stability. Those are the basics for a good economy, is to have good human rights, good property rights, and promote political stability. Simple. Simple. But the idea here is that those things promote a stable economy. The reason why property rights are so important is because it provides the citizenry with stability, right? Without property rights, it causes major issues with stability. And it also encourages things like fraud and corruption, etc. When we have political instability, I think we're all familiar with how that works, there's a threat to things like property rights, revolutions, revolutionary governments, issues within society, and issues outside of our society. So, having political stability is really a very important thing for having a stable and healthy economy. It's also important to understand our policies. Where do we stand on tariffs? Where do we stand on trade? And how do our policies impact or foster economic growth? That's inward looking. So, and then we also look outward. How do our policies interact with the world policies and international trade for goods and services? And we also look at other government policies and geography to foster trade among other nations. And of course, in addition to trade, we look at things like research and development to be able to continue to produce new technologies and advancements in research and advancements in our systems. All of these things help to foster the continued growth and stability of our economy. It's fairly reasonable to say that with innovation comes growth. The more innovative we are in our technology and processes and procedures and policy, etc., the better off we'll be in the future, the more stability and growth we'll have in our economy. As the population of the country and the world continue to grow, we see more workers that can produce more goods and services, which ultimately leads to larger output levels of these goods and services, right? That's the idea. So when you hear our politicians talking about, immigration laws and et cetera, while yes, they're important to protect the homeland, but in addition to that, it's important that we have enough workers in order to continue to produce goods and services, right? So there's multiple sides to the same argument. And when we look at the population growth, it's also important to consider the impact on the natural environment and the constraints that come with that. like drinking water issues, power issues, infrastructure problems, etc. With population growth also comes what we call dilution of capital stock. What we mean by this is that when we have more workers, at times of economic downturn, that produces lower productivity and ultimately lower GDP. This goes back to the law of diminishing returns. Once I reach my maximum output, the more I add to it, the worse it gets. And of course, there's also impacts on government regulation, etc. And to go along with the population growth also leads to additional technological progress and improvement. And we have more scientists, more inventors, more engineers, and more innovation ultimately. And all these things are great for the stability and growth of our economy. So that concludes our discussion on production and growth. Are there any questions about production and growth? Amazing, you're all good. Wow, holy smokes. Okay. All right, so here's where we're at. We have a few minutes. I want to call your attention back to the classroom and once again remind you of the critical importance of today. We are on week 8, which is the midterm week for this course. Here's what that means. We have 3 critical items for you to complete this week. We have the hypothesis, the chapter 11 and 12 quiz, and the midterm exam. I am going to repeat myself one last time by saying that if you have any remaining late work to complete, or if you need to retake some quizzes for your second attempt, all of that work, all of your late work, all the work that you missed, discussion boards, hypothesis, quizzes, all those things throughout the past 8 weeks, all of that must be completed this week. Must be completed this week. All of your late work, plus the hypothesis, the quiz, and the midterm exam must all be completed by this Sunday night. Okay? At this point, I will not and can not accept the midterm exam late. I'm going to say that one final time. I will not and cannot accept the midterm exam late. So, you have a lot of work to do this week. I am strongly encouraging you to start today and continue throughout the week to get all of your late work plus these 3 action items completed by Sunday night. I must report your midterm grades to the registrar's office on Monday. So please, once again, don't be late. You can't be late. If you're late, you cannot make it up. So again, do not be late, especially with the midterm exam. You cannot make it up. I will not allow it to be submitted late. Okay? In addition to those things, in order to help you, we have the midterm exam review video here for you. Okay? So before you take the midterm exam, I want you to watch this video. Why is it important? Just like I do with every course, I record the lecture, right? So here's the midterm exam. You're going to take that midterm exam. So what I did in this video is I opened it up and I started going through the questions. You'll notice there's a lot of questions in this exam. There's 45 questions to be precise. Okay, 45 questions. Why 45 questions? Well, if you think about the exam, the reason why there's 45 questions is because we just went through 12 chapters, right? So on average, you're looking at about, 5 questions per chapter? There's 12 chapters. So if you think about that, and if you watch this video, it's only, 6 minutes long, you're going to see that I talk about, how to go through it, where to find each question, okay? Going to the quizzes. If you go back through your quizzes, you're going to notice a whole lot of similarities between your quizzes and the midterm exam. That's a hint, okay? That's a hint. You go back through your quizzes, you're going to notice a lot of similarities between your quizzes and the exam. You'll also notice that if you have your PowerPoint presentations open as you're taking the exam, you'll notice a lot of similarities there as well. Okay? So 45 questions is a lot. This exam is going to take you well over an hour. I expect it'll take you a couple hours. All right? My recommendation for success is I would have the exam open and your PowerPoint presentations for the last 12 chapters. And I'd also recommend that you review all of your prior quizzes. If you do those things while taking the exam, you'll probably do real well. Okay? I promise you, you'll do well in this exam if you'll review the PowerPoint presentations, review your previous quizzes. You do those things, you'll do real well on this 45 question exam. Okay? Now here's the thing with the exam. You only have one shot to get it, okay? Only one try. However, you can answer your questions and click save and close as much as you want. So what I would recommend, for example, for the first 5 questions, you open up the Chapter 1 PowerPoint presentation, you open up the exam, you open up your previous quiz, answer the first 5 questions on the exam, click save and close, and then come back to it for the next 2 chapters and do that same thing again and again and again. If you do that process, I have a feeling you'll do real well on the midterm exam. Questions on that? Any questions? Comments, concerns? Anything? Y'all still out there?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. All right, cool. All right, so if y'all do that, go through that process, open up the PowerPoint presentation, open up your previous quiz, then do the midterm, go through that process for each chapter, I promise you do real well. You'll do real well. So, okay, so those are the things you got to knock out. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. All your previous work that's past due, plus the hypothesis, plus the quiz for this week, plus the midterm exam for this week. All that stuff's got to be due by Sunday night. I recommend you start today. Go through each day and just knock it out. All right? You do those things, you'll be okay. But remember, I can't take it late. I can't accept anything late past this midterm exam. Cannot do it. Cannot do it. So please, get it done. All right, thank you all so much for your time. I really do appreciate all of you. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, you can email me. You can call me. You can set up office hours. Okay? I'm here for you. I want you to do well. So, again, do everything you can. Let's make it happen. Let's finish strong. Thanks again. Appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Thanks,
care.
Professor.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you.